Good evening, it's 6:30. I'd like to call this order of the Charter Review Commission to order. I'll ask Ben to take the attendance because Michael's not here. Is Sarah on? Yeah, so
All right, Bradley Mayor,
Bradford Mayor, yes, here.
Bradford Mayor, sorry. Ben Paro,
Here.
Ted Tracy.
Here.
So- I'm blanking out, it's been a long day, sorry.
Jim Humphrey.
Jim
What did you call it? I can't remember what you called me before.
Jim Thorpe.
Jim Thorpe, which
Jim
was
Thorpe, yeah.
actually quite a nice name. Jim Humphrey here.
Scott Copley,
Here.
Sarah Repose,
Present.
Michael Stevens is absent, Scott Guthrie.
okay, we have 8 members present. The emergency evacuation procedure, should an alarm ring or we have to leave the building, it's directly out that door, it leads outside. Has anyone had, or has everyone had a chance to read the minutes of April 27th? Does anyone have any corrections or additions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Hi.
Chair votes aye. So voted. All business. Further discussing regarding elections, terms, party affiliation, ballots, and discussion and action. And our town council president is here tonight. And she has some recommendations or suggestions for us. And I'd like to open it up to you so you can
Thank you.
give us your thoughts.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give a number of recommendations. You are free to accept or not accept them. I just give them. I've been watching the YouTube videos and I feel I'm familiar with all of you and some of your,
So you do know that we had planned on sending you updates, right?
yes.
So you're going to update us instead of us updating you?
No, we certainly expect you to update us when
Okay.
you're ready, okay?
Just double checking.
Yeah. These recommendations basically are based on my experiences having been on a Charter Review Commission in 2012. At that year, we had 12 recommendations, which were bundled in groups of 4, and all our recommendations were approved by the council and by the voters. So we do have some kind of a track record. And I also have been on the town council when recommendations from a Charter Review Commission were presented to us. So the suggestions I'm going to make or the recommendations are based on those experiences, okay? So I'm going to talk about 4 categories. One is the time schedule. One is the recommendation format. The second is the need for voting. And the 4th is scope, all right? So first, time schedule. The deadline for submission by the town to the state is August 10th. So I'm going to work backward in time. The Charter Review Commission should be prepared to present recommendations on June 13th with an opportunity to return on June 27th, at which point the council will vote either June 13th and or June 27th. The next council meeting after that will be July 25th, and that's going to be too late for a legal review and submission to the state by August 10th. So your target date is June 13th. The council basically does not vote based, if you've watched the meetings, the council doesn't always vote the first time they hear something. They like to deliberate, they like to think about something. So you need to leave enough time for that deliberation to occur, perhaps on the 27th. So I'm suggesting that your target date is the 13th. When the recommendations are approved, they will go to our legal counsel. That would be Mr. Gorham or Mr. D'Agostino. And they will review, they will revise for appropriate format for the charter and submission to the state. So that's basically the process that will follow. Okay, any questions on the time schedule?
And I think what's important too is, in my mind, is just 13th and 27th is kind of hold those dates. Just make sure we're available. Now that we know that.
Mhm. Well, not all of you need to be present on the 13th or the 27th, but you certainly can do that. Okay, and since you are an official public group, if you have a majority or you have at least a majority of the members there, we'd have to have a joint meeting. Okay, so you just let me know. Okay, recommendations. I'm going to make the following recommendations. As I mentioned to you, you're free to accept or not accept these, but these best practices. I would recommend that you would have a handout for each council member. So in other words, when you come to present, be prepared to have a handout for them. And if you're able to have a handout with your recommendations on it ahead of time, so it can be included in their packet, so that they can read this before they actually meet, that is even better for them. They don't like usually to get something, just here it is, folks, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Next, recommendations should, for the ease of the council, have the section number, original text, and revised text, so it's easy for them to follow. And in other words, a recommendation that just has your revision without them being able to compare it to how it appears in the charter now is not a desirable thing. So revised plus the original content. Recommendation should not be a summary and or justification. In other words, I hear you talk about, necessity of preparing a summary. Justifications can be made when you're making your oral presentations to the council, but you should not worry about a summary. The summary is prepared by a legal counsel. What you're doing is presenting your recommendation for how you would like the charter changed by section. Okay, recommendations should be straightforward. They should consider all applicable sections. For example, if you're talking about partisan elections, you should consider 2.07 and 2.09. If you're talking about terms of office, number of districts, you've got to consider at least 3.01, 3.06, and 3.11. So you've got to comb through the charter, not only within the section, but in other sections to make sure that every single section that may have something to do with the recommendation you're making is in alignment with what you are suggesting. For Charter Review Commission, you should be considering 8.16 through 8.19. So make sure you don't miss those sections because they're all related to each other. For example, for budget and potential amendments, you need to consider all of Article 8 of every single section. So every connected section must be considered. Otherwise, there will be problems and it'll flip back to us from legal review. For example, whether or not school committee terms and numbers of members should mirror the town council, and you've been discussing that, you need to get input from the school committee. The town council will not be able to make an informed decision without knowing that you have considered input from the school committee. So if that's still on the table for you, numbers of people on the school committee or their terms or what have you, or even if it's partisan or nonpartisan, you need to get input from them, all right? This was too long?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But I will remind you that we do have legal counsel who will put everything into place and make sure that any other part of the charter that's affected by it is included. So when it goes to you, it will have been reviewed by legal counsel of this commission.
But the town council will expect that the legal counsel for the town council will review all of the recommendations.
And he has the right to.
Yes, he does have the right to, and will have the right to make changes as appropriate. Okay, just to let you know, because that is the way we operate using our legal counsel, which is Gorham law. Okay. Final voting for each recommendation, you should as a body vote and record your vote in the minutes of this group. So if you're going to have a recommendation for, I'll just say 3.01 or something like that, you should actually vote and record. It's like 5-2 or 6-3 or what have you, because I know you have 9 members. And the Charter Review Commission should vote on its recommendation in the form in which it will present to the council, so that we know that how you all have voted on the particular format and the particular content that you are submitting to the council. Okay. Topics. This has to do with scope. I've heard a number of comments about fire districts, et cetera. And I just want to remind you that when the commission was charged, it was charged to review the charter, not special acts, Article 3, Section 260. That was not within your scope. So if you wish to make any kinds of recommendations regarding fire safety, fire districts, or what have you, what you can do as a commission, you can say that you would like you might recommend a study group to be formed, and the council can then take that until deliberation. The council has not received any written communication from any fire districts regarding changes in the structure of the fire department of the fire districts. There have been some conversations here and there and everywhere, social media, et cetera, but the council has not received any kinds of directives. Right now, the only thing we're working on is a request by at least 3 of the fire districts for opera funds. But that's the only type of written request that we have received relating to fire districts whatsoever. So I just want to remind you that spend your time wisely. You don't have that many more weeks to deliberate. But this Article 3, Special Acts, Section 260 is not within the scope that the council has directed you to consider. So if you wish to make some comment about having a study group to look at this, that's within your purview, but to ask to make changes and recommendations for changes to that particular article, it's not in scope. So any questions you'd like to ask me? I hope this clarifies a little bit.
Very helpful.
I've been watching the meetings. I haven't watched every single one, but I've watched most of them. And I'm, listening to the deliberations and, your conversations. And I just wanted to make sure that you were set to present to the council on the 13th, because you don't have that much time. The 13th, my guess is that many of the things will be held over to the 27th, but that will be really the last time the council is going to be able to vote, because voting in July is going to be too close for a legal review by our legal counsel for submission to the state.
Only question that I have on it,
Correct.
you mentioned you want the original text and the revised text.
Yes.
Do you have a preference for how that's put in there, side by side? Like a Microsoft editor in which you have the additions and the subtractions.
Or strike through,
Or strike
red,
through.
black, those.
I don't have any preferences, but what I have noticed by the council is that when we have had ordinances to review,
Mhm.
there have been usually strike throughs or changes have been in red. But there's no rule on that. There's no rule
No, it's a
on
matter
that.
of preference and how you'd like to see it.
Yeah, but whenever the council has received an ordinance, for example,
Mhm.
and they've just seen the revision that's being proposed, they always say, we want to see what are the changes and show us so we can compare the changes.
Mhm.
So I just want to pass on how I see the council working and how, I work with them. This eases up the discussion because it's very easy for us to go back and forth and see the changes.
Question I have is, in looking through past proposals that have been put to the ballot,
Right.
some of them in years, I think back when you were
Yeah.
on this commission, had more of a simple question. More recent ones have included whole text to, in fact, one whole page was one question. Do you want us, we've been working on not only putting together what we want to propose as an amendment to the actual charter, but the question that goes with it in more of a simplified manner. Do you want that from us? Or do you just want us to present you, here's our proposal for change, how you word the ballot will be up to you?
It's not what I want. I'm just trying to suggest to you what I've seen, how things have worked, how things operate, and what I think will make it easiest for you to present your recommendations. I recall one of the last ballots, we had a very, very long text, went over to the second page, people did not want to read it, etc. Your recommendation should be very straightforward. There's no justification within it, and you're not responsible for writing a summary. Put down what you are recommending for the change to that particular section.
Mhm.
Then it will be reviewed, as I said, by a legal counsel. And the legal counsel is the person who usually writes the summary and determines what will be on the ballot or not. Okay,
The legal counsel doesn't determine what goes on the ballot, the council does.
the council determines what is approved to go on the ballot, but the legal counsel will look at how well it adheres to any legal requirements that the state might have or that are required for a
Right.
ballot. Okay, they're not going to, the legal counsel will not change your intent. If you say that you want partisan elections, they're not going to change it to nonpartisan elections. That's not their role. But they're going to look at how it is worded.
Right.
Okay. And so usually on the ballot, it is approve or reject.
Right, one of the ones that we've been working on was filling the vacancies.
Right.
And I've worked on a draft that we've circulated,
Right.
haven't voted on yet, but I wrote it as, here's what I kind of would like the question to be, and to put it simple, is amend this section to allow for vacancies to be filled as such, but not print all the text that would appear to go with it. Are you okay with that as a recommendation? Like, here's the overall, and then here's the actual text.
I think what you should, my recommendation is that you put in the recommendation exactly as you would wish the charter to be changed.
Okay.
And leave it up to legal counsel to determine how it would be presented on the ballot.
Okay.
You, of course, could recommend that you would like it shortened so it's easy for people to read the ballot and they don't skip over anything. But you should write down exactly as you would want it changed.
The actual,
Yeah.
okay, so your big thing from us is like, how do you want it the end result of the charter to be as our proposal?
Yes.
Okay,
Because some of the discussion I'm hearing, I'm saying to myself, when I'm taking notes, what is really the intent here? What, I can understand sort of the intent, but I'm not understanding how it's going to work.
Mhm.
And the charter is also going to talk about how it's going to work. You know, for example, if you decide that you're going to have 2 at-large people, all right, and you decided you wanted partisan elections, okay? I'm saying to myself at home, what does this mean? If someone at large quits, that person was a Democrat. Are you intending that that replacement would be a Democrat, or could it be anyone out there? I don't know. So, I mean, you're going to be really very specific about how you see vacancies would be filled. That's only one little example.
Yep.
You know, so, I mean, I'm just saying that as a voter, I'm a voter, you know, and I'm saying to myself, what does this all mean? And how is it going to work? And when is it going to start? Those are the kinds of questions I have as a voter. Okay, other questions you might like to ask?
Under 1520 amendment of charter, we had been talking about that and the fact that some of the ballots had been just ridiculously long
Mhm,
and they were written in legislative form.
mhm.
I can see sending something to the council that has, you know, you can strike and amend and add and make it easy for them in that format. But to send something to the voters that like that is way too much. And you just stated that there was one charter amendment that took up an entire page of the ballot.
Mhm.
So we talked about reducing that. We also talked about stating the intention of the change and why we're asking for the change. Under the state law, it says you don't have to put the language that you're asking us to put. And in here, under the last section of 1520, it says it shall not be necessary for the full text of a charter or of amendments to a charter to be printed upon a ballot. Any digest or description thereof, or any question or statement which substantially expresses the purpose or identifies the subject matter to be voted upon shall be sufficient. The council shall approve the statement of the question as it shall appear on the ballot. It doesn't say that the solicitor does. It just says right here that you get to say what we send to you and have it put on the ballot. And as I said, if any change that we do, and mind you, this charter is 50 years old and there have been 15 changes, and the majority of them were for political purposes. We are trying to make a simplified charter. And if you stay for the entire meeting, you'll probably hear a presentation on something else that we're looking to do, which is a full review of the charter, a 50-year comprehensive review of the charter. So what it says in the charter right now is what we send you is what we send you. If you want to pay a lawyer to sit down for 24 hours or however long to sit and write it the way that he wants to write it, that's fine. That's at your cost, not mine. But we have legal counsel in this room that will take care of that for you. So my thought is that you may be getting information and sending recommendations that are suggested to you by someone other than someone in this room, or maybe more than likely the solicitor. And we're going to be talking about him tonight too, if you want to stay for that.
I will be staying for the entire meeting.
Okay.
So I
So-
mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, you're free to ask whomever you want for legal advice or any kind of advice whatsoever. This is the approved Charter Commission members who have been vetted by the town council, who have been appointed to sit on this commission. and I consider this very important. I mean, I actually initiated the thought that we needed to have another charter review commission. I mean, I felt it was important to do that. But I want to see, we should see the council, I know how they work. They want to see exactly the change in the charter as you want it. And then it will be, as I said, reviewed legally, and then there will be determination made how it would appear on the ballot, et cetera. But you should not have any justification worked into what you would like in the charter. The charter should be very, very straightforward, easy to understand and interpret. So your justification will come when you make your oral presentations.
So that's more of our explanation to you of why we're doing something, but the actual text that we're handing you, we're proposing an amendment to 301. Here's
This is what it would
now
say.
and future or whatever format, but that's it. And then here we're going to explain to you our reasons for putting that in front of you.
I mean, some of the charter sections, for example, a nonpartisan elections, that's a pretty straightforward sentence there. But when you start talking about the way by which people vote, by which the budget is approved by the council, et cetera, that's a little bit more detailed, as you well understand. And we've had many issues and problems with that in the past. And the change in the charter here, in the format we see now with the town financial meeting, which is basically just informational now. I mean, that was sort of a knee-jerk reaction based on a meeting that we had, I recall.
That went crazy.
Well, we started off with 900 people or 1,000 people. And I remember at 1 o'clock in the morning, there were only about 200 or 300 people left. And I mean, when you think about it, for a town this size with almost 25,000 voters, to have something so important as a budget approved by 300 or less people, well, actually it was less than 300 people, that's not really democracy when you think about it. But that's up to you to decide. I mean, I'm not here to tell you my opinion about any of the topics you're discussing. But I just want to mention to you what was going to be the easiest way to facilitate presenting to the council, getting their buy-in, and then moving forward. Other
So
questions?
just for an example, a format that was something like this would be acceptable.
Yeah, that would be very easy.
Because we have a group that's working on looking at the budget and the
Good.
budget adoption process. And that's how, right now, what we're doing right now is the strike through in red
Yeah.
print.
I just wanted to, I'm sure that you've thought about some of these things. Some members have, some members haven't actually verbalized it at a meeting. But I just thought I would sort of try to bring a lot of things together to make it a little bit easier for you to go forward.
Because I think some of the suggestions that we're probably would move forward will be straightforward.
Good,
I think the budget is, as you know, very complex.
it is.
So I'm just trying, I think to your point, what helps the town council? And as I'm thinking through everything I'm listening, you've presented it before. So my thinking is right off the top, we said the sections that we are addressing are XYZ,
Mhm.
why and what's the intent? I like to work with 3 bullet points. What's the reason why? Then there's the language, and this is going to be multiple pages with tons of strikeouts and changes, which hopefully we get there in advance, because if I'm a council, I want to read that in advance. Don't walk me through the whole thing. Maybe you need to walk. Do we want to walk through the entire thing? Or some of these things, they might want to read the 5 pages of changes.
As I mentioned to you before, I hand out ahead of time
Right.
that receive in their packet.
Yeah,
Now,
found
we don't
them.
receive our packet until Friday night, and we're in a meeting on Monday. So,
Earlier the better.
the earlier the better. And in other words, you could receive an email to each of the council members. They have that. They also get the hard copy in their packet. And that way they have some time to assess and determine the kinds of questions they would like to ask. And that gives you enough time on the 13th. And then I'm pretty sure they'll come back and ask questions, and you'll be presenting again on the 27th.
Sure, that makes sense.
Okay, but that really would be the last time when you can do something based on the time schedule.
Because that's the thing, I think, to everybody's point, is creating a nice side by side that's easy to read, so they can really see where the changes are. Obviously, we need to do that. How in a presentation, how we walk through that's a lot. I'm looking for your advice. Do we just hit the highlights and they can read the detail? Like this is going to be multiple pages and multiple sections. Again, I'm just looking for advice on that, because we don't want I don't want to spend an hour and a half on one thing and then there's like not any time left to go through 5 other things.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there's a best way to do that.
I'm not sure there's a best way to do it.
Okay.
You don't have a lot of time because on the 13th, we have an extremely full
Yeah,
agenda.
there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. We have, I mean, every week, if you notice, we're supposed to meet twice a month and we've been meeting like, I think this month we've got about 5 meetings or 6 meetings going on. There's a lot going on, but we're trying to make sure that we cover the topics that are of great interest to the voters and that are immediate. And so I can't really tell you how to do it. I think it'll become obvious to you as you work your way and you make your decisions about what it is you want to present. And, you know, the bottom line is the council needs to understand exactly what you are presenting because they're the ones who are going to be going out and promoting this.
Mhm.
We're going to be
Right.
going out and going on radio and social media, asking for a vote for the recommendations that they are approving. So they've got to understand it themselves. They got to be able to present it to the constituents.
So the high level things are important. And then the side by side, I think some things will be very straightforward. You can walk right through it. Some things might be, we hit the highlights. And I really do like the idea. We talked a lot about the ballot language. I mean, I'm doing all the work on this, maybe that's why I'm
I
close to it,
understand.
is at least a suggestion of what the ballot question might look like. Obviously, it's going to go through a lot of review, but that might be helpful for the presentation too, to see what it might look like,
Well,
in our opinions anyhow.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that you're going to have to weigh how much time is it going to take you to explain how you want the ballot to look, or how much time do you want to spend explaining or going through the changes in the charter that you want?
Right.
What's more important to you? To explain how you want the ballot to look, or to explain,
What's the
What you-
change we're trying to
what is-
actually
what's the
advocate
change?
for?
yeah. And then verbally, you'll explain, you know, your rationale. But think about how you're going to use your time and maximize your time for the greatest impact.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking about it and thinking about the budget issue that we're as a subcommittee working on, it almost seems like that ballot question, the way we've been thinking about it, really will be the key bullet points at the top. So they might be one and the same while having to propose a ballot. Maybe that could just be an attachment they could look at their leisure. And then going through some of the language, I think some of the key points in the language will be important. And we'll watch our time.
Mhm.
You know, we'll probably have an allotted time to do this, I would imagine.
Well, you have a few more meetings before the 13th.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm here now, just to give you some ideas that might help facilitate your discussions and help you be very successful. Because I know that you've been working weekly and you've been at it for a while, because we actually had this orientation in December. So you've been at it for a while, and I do congratulate you for sticking to it and having such good attendance every week. Because that's a great thing. We don't always have that with every board and commission. So you're very passionate about what you're doing, and I appreciate that, because there are changes that are needed in the charter. But I don't want to spend any more time of your valuable time during your meeting. But I just wanted to give you some ideas.
Well, I have a couple more questions.
Can I ask
So you
and
finish.
this is probably a question you have too, because we talked about the idea of vetting some of our ideas without fully flushing them out with the council to say, they might be like, oh, no way. I mean, we could know that. Why do a whole bunch of research on something that's never going to move forward?
Well, we have a meeting Monday night, May 2nd, and we have one, no, I'm sorry, we passed May 2nd. We have a meeting May 9th, but we do not have another meeting till the 13th. We have one other meeting, which is the 23rd, as an executive session, which we may have to add a couple of, that would be the only possibility. The other possibility is that I possibly could call an extra meeting at the beginning of June. But that would be based on your recommendation to me that you need more time than you think you'd be able to have. And, you know, I might be able to slot in a few minutes on that particular meeting for that special meeting, or have a
I'm
special
thinking like
meeting.
we've been thinking like, let's just say there's 9 things we're working on. And it's like one sentence each, you know, partisan, just to float those ideas. And we got ideas from the council from a
Sure.
survey that was provided to
Sure.
us. They may look at that and go, oh, these are all great. Yeah, continue your work. Or it might be, well, these two, you know, don't spin your wheels on that. You know, that's not going to go anywhere.
That was part of our council update that we would do. We would suggest, vote, and send an update to you and ask for your input on it so that we together can get something done. Now,
You don't have much time to do that.
well, I disagree, and I'm going to tell you why. Nothing that happens through this charter review is going to affect anything that you do as a government until after the people vote on it.
That's correct.
There is no imminent need to get what this commission needs to get done until 60 days before the printing of the ballots. And we'll even throw some time in there for legal review for the legal counsel for the town, and we still have plenty of time. I also think it was great that you did decide to put a charter review together because you confirmed something that we are discussing under amendment of charter, which is for political reasons, they carved out who could be on the commission. Look how long it took you to get people. All right, you couldn't get 9 people together. There was an opinion made that we could meet as an ad hoc committee, which is against the United States, I mean, against the Rhode Island Constitution. You know, so we will take our time and have everything in place for you, and it'll be in place in a timely manner, but you got to give us the time to do it.
Well, let's just put it this way, the November
let me
election
say
is
one
an
more thing.
artificial date.
And let me say one more thing.
Yes, certainly.
And you brought up something about elections. You brought up about a partisan election, a Democrat or Republican who's going to replace what? There is only one sentence in this charter that deals with nonpartisan elections. You take that one section out and it goes right back to the way it was. There is no big deal. We will tell each and every council members how many votes they didn't get that they could have got in their last election cycle and any election cycle, cycle before that. This, the nonpartisan thing that we've been talking about has proven that council people are the last people to get a vote. And if government is to work for the people, it's the closest person to a voter is their council person. And if they don't know how to find that person on a ballot, they're not going to get that vote. You would be shocked at how many people didn't get votes that they could have gotten. So it's not like a lot of thought isn't going into this. There's a real lot of thought going into it. And as I said, if anything that we change or propose to change in the charter will have any other charter section addressed in full. So maybe the better thing to do is have a workshop and have the council sit, have this commission to sit, have our legal counsel sit, have the council's legal counsel sit, and hammer it all out and send it to the people because we're creating how their government runs. And we're trying to make it work and run easier for them. And like I said, I'm glad that you're going to stick around because Bob had an excellent idea about the 50-year comprehensive change. And like I said, there were only 15 changes in this charter in 50 years. And they were done for political reasons. One of them being the amendment of the charter that was in 2010 that practically carved anybody out from being able to serve on it, which was hard for you as a council president to get enough people to get the work done that you wanted to see done. So don't think that there's a war between us and the council. We just want, and we're using our input and our ideas to get a question to the voters that they want. You also brought up about the fire department thing. No, it's not in the charter. It predates the charter, which means a whole lot more than it being in the charter.
I understand that.
Okay, and furthermore, and 1202 in the charter says that you are responsible for fire and rescue. So we're trying to find a way to get the information to the voter. Something interesting might happen on Monday. They may pass that budget, they may not pass that budget, but it falls squarely in the lap of the town council. And I would be prepared for it. And as a commission chair, I think that the people in this room have to prepare for it too, because something either bad or good could happen before we send a presentation to you. And if the voters are clamoring to have more accountability, more oversight of how fire and rescue services are done in this town, then that question deserves to go to them in November. And regardless of what happens in central Coventry, we will push that question to go to November. It's what needs to be done. And you probably heard me say on our meetings, I know you said that you watched them all, is that you may not get, the people may not get the chance to do it, and it may be foisted upon you. So what do we do in the interim? Do we let it collapse? Do we go to court? Do we let, the town's legal counsel argue against the fire district's legal counsel? They're in the same firm, and that bothers me. So
I've heard you voice that opinion.
yes,
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and as I said before, I'm here to give just some recommendations, and you're free to accept or not accept them, but it's based on best practices and my experiences, and I speak for myself and not the entire council. I think I made that pretty clear. There's one comment you did make, and that is that if something is not changed or is changed in the charter, you go back to where it was before. That is not correct.
I did not say that, I don't think.
I believe you did say that. If you make a change, if you make a change in the charter, you don't go back to where you were before. I mean, you have to make recommendations for changes, okay?
I don't think I said that.
I think it only pertained to the partisan question, where if you said you took the one sentence out.
Yeah, if you take
you'd
the
go
one
back to the
sentence
way-
Go
out,
back, yeah.
you go back to partisan voting. So
But
like
we
I
still have to
said-
No,
word
you
that.
don't, you don't go back to partisan voting.
You have to word what you want it to go
How
to.
does it
It's
work?
one thing to just strike text out, then we have no guidance, so we
Yeah,
would
no
have to
guidance
replace
whatsoever.
it with what, I don't know what, I don't have it in front
Well,
of
if
me.
the
what
change
text
before was a
beforehand.
simple one sentence addition, then a one sentence subtraction would go back to the way.
No, it wouldn't go back.
Well, I
Well,
think
no, reverse
that-
the state law. So
But
because
anyway,
the council,
Okay,
the
okay.
council addresses
that
state
could
law.
be addressed legally.
okay, I think that, don't want to interrupt your meeting because we've already spent 30 minutes on
That's all
this.
right.
But I
Let's
mean,
stay
I
on
was
that.
hoping that it would be useful for your consideration.
Very useful.
Yes, very useful.
To help you.
We
move
appreciate
forward,
you
help
taking a
move-
night to come. I know you have a lot of meetings too to go.
We want to help you and
It's
we want,
okay.
we want you to
I'm
help
going to
us.
be here for the whole evening.
A lot of meetings go to, and a lot of meetings apparently to watch on TV instead of the latest show on NBC. So appreciate that.
No,
It's a
but,
lot, it's a lot.
I've enjoyed watching the meetings, and I'm glad that I'm here again, and I will be here.
Hopefully we're entertaining.
Okay,
You're entertaining.
Are we?
further-
I hope so.
Oh, yes, you are.
Okay.
Further, it looks like we've touched on the elections, party affiliation and so forth, and the amendment of charter, which I just explained to Madam President. This is B, section 801, 18, 19, and 30. You suggested that we take a look at the entire section 8,
Just to make sure that you're covering all the sections.
right?
Right,
So,
but we only need to make the changes on sections that we are modifying. But we need to review the entire
Right.
Yes,
section.
you do.
So-
We need to review title 8
The whole, in its
And-
entirety. So
in its
Make sure
entirety,
that,
but
because
right.
because sometimes things sneak up on you, and you don't realize that there's something mentioned in another
Well,
section that
that's
really is.
interesting.
Oh,
That's-
funny,
that's-
we
that's-
found that
that's a-
several
That's a nice
times already.
segue, actually.
And I
Yeah.
will say, because as we're working on it, and I've typed up the first draft that we're going through, and on our initial thing, it was like, we're looking at sections 816 and 818, and I go, okay, great. Well, as I'm going through it, I find something in 819 that mentions something that's in 818. So it's like,
Bingo.
okay, so now we have 819 on the list.
You got
Now,
it.
I've
Exactly.
given my go through, and those are the 3 sections that I found changes that we're addressing, but
Good.
that's,
Yeah.
the same.
okay, so we do have a subcommittee that's been working specifically
Right.
for the changing of the, not changing, but amending the way that we do the budget. Jim?
Yeah, we met again yesterday in library. Raising hell there. Everybody doesn't mind us being loud there apparently. I'm so used to going to libraries and being quiet. But
Not
so
not
everybody-
anymore.
yeah, we've been meeting regularly. We're meeting again next Tuesday evening as well. I think we're going to be able to present this on the 25th here. So, and that's where we can maybe have a recorded vote. That's the intent. That's just within our group here. But, some of the things that we focused on, I'll just give you some of the highlights because ultimately we're going to present what we're working on. We're all sharing the burden of doing things. But one of the things that was very important, it was brought up by the public, is the kind of the guardrails. Again, the intent is a better way to involve the public in the budget process and a better way to get the budget across the finish line in a timely manner, essentially. I think we actually had three key points: improve public input to the budget decision process, restore the public's ability to modify the town budget, and eliminate a fiscal uncertainty in the current process. And the idea is using petitioning, and I know you're familiar with that. So there's really like two phases. I'm not going to get into the whole thing. We've talked about it a lot. There's a line item phase at the discretion of the town council, where the public can, with appropriate signatures and explanation, can provide ideas to the council. And then there's the kind of the big issue is the budget referendum petition, keyword petition, where the public has the ability, with appropriate number of signatures, with a certain dollars threshold, with the appropriate, very important guardrails around it, can impact the budget. And we're seeing the budget as a final approved town council budget. People can go and we kind of are using a threshold of we've looked at all the different towns, about maybe like 10 towns that use petitioning in one way, shape, or form. And we kind of, just to give you some of the things we talked about yesterday, we talked about like 500 signatures. It's got to be an effort. It's got to be thought out. People need to understand the budget to promote and provide a referendum petition. And that petition, as vetted with the signatures verified, would trigger what we're going to call not a financial town meeting, we're going to call something different, where they get a chance to present that. So we'll kind of retain that date because it exists already. And that would in turn trigger an election. So what you would see would be the approved town council budget and one or many adjustments to that budget. We think we want to break it down by school, municipal, and capital. We're kind of going through that because it's a math problem. It's got to make sense where you select the approved town council budget or an adjustment. And that's it.
That's not election, that's referendum.
Referendum. But we have kind of, just to give you a sense of guardrails, and I don't want to take very much more time because we're
Take all
still
the time you need.
we're working on it. Oh, thank you.
This
You-
woman right here is
you-
very interested in what you have to
If you
say.
talk to my colleagues in marketing and IGT, you don't want to say that. But we saw a $250,000 minimum threshold for that referendum event. And we're going to use percentages. So number of signatures, 2% of electors. The threshold, minimum threshold, 0.2% of the approved town council budget. That's what we're looking at right now with guardrails. And the other guardrails are, obviously, we've got, Rhode Island general law, where you're restricted 4% year-over-year growth. And you're also restricted by maintenance of effort of schools and other Rhode Island general law 16-7, things I've been working on with Ray. So we have those guardrails, and more importantly, the one we just talked about last night was, the tax levy from the previous year cannot be decreased. So you kind of level, at minimum, your level of funding. So those are the guardrails. Those are very important in this whole thing, because it can't be, please reduce the budget by $111 million. Can't do that. So it's got to be well thought out. You've got to have an effort to get the appropriate signatures, an appropriate timeline. Obviously, this is an effort, and we're looking at illustrative timelines. You guys obviously create the timeline, but to see how that can fit in and work and give people an appropriate amount of time to do these line item petitions and to be able to do a referendum petition as well. So we're working on language, ballot language, pros and cons, high level reasons to do it. We're packaging that up. I think we're going to present it on the 25th. I think that'll work. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
The only other thing is that we're trying to make it so going forward, if approved, it will not lock in anything that becomes burdensome in the future. So that's why we're discussing putting a percentage as a minimum versus a dollar amount, a percentage of the electors for signatures versus a fixed number. And we talk about timelines. We're trying to do drafts about different ways to present it. In our latest draft, the only date we put as a hard date was be the last date, which to make sure it's done before the end of the, or before the start of the next fiscal year. So that way we give, and we, with the wording of no later than, which gives you as the town council, the flexibility to go earlier, but just like making sure it's done by a set time. So that's our goal, to make it as,
I'm still having a problem with the word minimum. So you're saying that if somebody changed the budget, you're starting off at a minimum instead of a maximum.
Correct.
In other words, you're not setting a cap.
well, the cap
Cap is set
is,
by the state.
Those are the guardrails that which do establish a cap.
Okay, so now I understand the minimum, because nobody told me before. So it's going to be between minimum of 250,000
Increase or decrease.
and it
And
can't,
whatever-
it can't go any higher than
And the
30,
four-
the 30,
4%.
50 legislation that was put in by the Senate.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it will never increase more than 4%.
Yeah, and
that's
this,
correct.
there was, many towns put in additional language, like a couple of paragraphs, had a cross-eyed reading a couple of times, where they had some, town council could could look at something as unreasonable and change it. And we didn't want to do that. But what we're trying to institute is some guardrails to make it reasonable. Because I think the concern is, obviously you have guardrails for the increase. I mean, it's limited by law.
Mhm.
So we know that. The other concern was to have a bottom limit. You know, that was you can't go in there and say minus $111 million. We also don't want, that's not a juncture where, oh, I wanted to change something 5,000 by $5,000 and get 500 signatures.
And have a
That-
referendum that costs $10,000.
That wouldn't make any sense. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be well thought out. And that's the idea. It gives the public skin in the game. It gives them the ability to impact that, but at the same time, it's just not, you just can't say no. You
So-
got it, you have to have a reason
So
for
the
it.
other thing that worries me. So this is designed for a budget increase beginning at a minimum of $250,000.
Or decrease.
Increase or decrease.
So,
The,
so,
the,
so they have to decrease the budget by a minimum?
no,
Yes.
if you're gonna, if,
So it's such the only,
Mhm.
what you're saying is the most that can be cut out of a budget is 250,000.
250,000
No.
or more
Minimum.
no,
Relief. There's the
With-
least
with-
amount. you
with-
can
So-
cut.
with guardrails.
let me,
So if they got 500 signatures and got it put on the ballot and somebody said, let's just defund the town, it'll happen, won't it?
no.
Well, no, that's why we're putting
exactly-
in the
so-
guardrails.
So that's exactly what we were discussing yesterday.
So-
So the language we were putting in is the decrease cannot put the overall town tax levy below what it was in the previous year.
Okay.
So just to use,
So I'm asking you these questions, just in case anybody
They're good-
is
good que-
watching this.
Same
or
questions
intends-
we're asking each other.
Right.
Mhm.
In case anybody's watching it or intends to watch it.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of like being the devil's advocate a little bit.
That's good.
so just to use, Council President, if you don't mind me using the budget that was approved the
Sure.
other night, you have a 2.75% increase.
Correct.
I don't know what the exact dollars break that out to. One petition can be put forward to increase it by another 1.25% to get to the 4% max. A separate petition can try to cut 2.75 to get it back to 0, but those are your ends.
Zero
And that's,
Yeah.
and that's,
increase, zero
I'm
increase.
sorry.
Zero increase.
or a decrease of 2.75%,
Yeah.
or back, whatever.
So
I think
the,
you know what I'm saying, but,
I
Yeah, the
understand.
school-
Okay.
We are required to meet the minimum
and there's a I know there's requirements for the school that have to be met and
maintenance
whatnot,
of
but
effort.
that's also, we basically said,
So you
cannot
go- you
violate
can't-
state law, so you
you
can't
can't
go
go below
backwards
that.
that part
yeah, so we're trying to create like an artificial maintenance effort for the whole.
for the
thing.
town as
So
a
you
whole.
can't go below the previous year's tax levy.
Well, when I'm
If you're
talking
decreasing.
about tax levy, we're talking about an amount of money, which is the minimum maintenance of effort. You could go
Yeah.
below the tax levy, which maybe this year will be 275. You could go to 0 as long as the amount of money that is being appropriated is not less than meets the minimum maintenance of effort.
Right, yeah, so like for overall, you're saying you can't go below the 0%. If they're going, if they put in a petition to decrease the budget, they can't go below 0% increase. They
Is that-
can't go into
Is
negative.
that minimum maintenance of effort for the school side or for
It-
both?
It's just for schools.
School.
Okay, so So they're already covered, I think, under that
Yeah.
because they can't,
Because it's state law that you can't go
you
below
can't go
that.
below what you have. So,
We're just trying to build
What
in a
was
safeguard for the
appropriated for
town.
them?
Yeah,
right.
From the town
Yeah,
appropriation.
the
Yeah.
town's appropriate.
Like the
Yeah.
state cuts their state aid, it's too bad.
Right, it becomes more of a burden here.
If
and
the
you have
state,
to make the
yeah, if the
adjustment.
state.
Because that's what happened a couple
cuts
years
their-
ago. They,
Cuts their state aid, then we have to find a way to provide the appropriation from local taxes.
Mhm.
Yep.
Unless they find grants,
or, yeah.
some other sources.
Anything further on budget?
I think, as we have this conversation, we have ourselves, that's why explaining this is going to be critical to keep it simple. Maybe even examples could be very helpful, but those are things we really need to think about because it's a tough one.
So how many registered voters are there in the town?
26,000, I believe, approximately.
So 2%.
28, I have 28,872
That means the 2% is at least five,
roughly,
at least 500 names.
right.
That's tricky to get.
Right, and we had a conversation about
I
that.
guess they're trying to not make it unreachable, but to make it so that you really have to work and you really have to organize.
And we looked
So-
at least a dozen other towns and we saw a range from 200 to 10% of the voters. So we've seen a little bit of everything
Yeah.
being used out there. So that, as he said, is our goal is we don't want it to be impossible, but we want to make it so it's at least takes some effort.
Challenging.
because you don't really want to, I mean, the more people get involved, the better, but like, you don't want to have a referendum where there's like 20 different options.
Excuse me, does it still include the first petition?
Yes.
Yes,
Can you explain that?
yeah, there's a level of petition earlier on in the process. Or after, I think we're in the timeline after the public hearings, people are digesting the budget and where it's going. They make some recommendations. We're looking at like 20 signatures. It's like a line item level. I've talked to South Kingstown, North Kingstown, which has been very successful because, actually town council's got some good ideas. Let's do a GIS study on X, Y, or Z for, environmental impact or whatever. And some of those things, and it's at the discretion of the town council. They kind of look, let's just say they get 20 of them. They'll go through them and vote on them and say, well, yes, no, yes, no, those digest that. And it proved to be helpful.
And the number that
So-
we're using would be to keep it bigger than a single household, yet easily doable for somebody who's serious about wanting something added or considered by the town council for inclusion. in the
It's under
budget.
consideration.
So under layman's terms. So that first petition would happen after the council adopts the preliminary budget? Is that how you guys wrote it?
It's a great
Are-
question. You must have listening to us last night.
So
We really literally had this conversation.
I wasn't listening, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get some
Key
more
question.
information for myself, and I know that Ian wants to hear the same, because after they adopt the preliminary budget, they have to go to hearing again. So instead of going to hearing, they go to petition, or is it both?
Our action from the meeting last night was, I originally had looked at this thing called provisional budget that was submitted to the state, and we want to look at that again, but let's say it's a preliminary budget. I think the intent is to impact the preliminary budget, to have those line item level petitions forwarded and presented to the town council to impact that preliminary budget. But we're still looking at timelines and trying to understand that, so any feedback would be.
I
Would be
just
welcome.
mentioned that the town council does not approve a preliminary budget. We hear a presentation by the superintendent of schools. We hear a presentation by the town manager, and we hear the recommendation by the town manager.
Yeah.
But we are not approving a preliminary budget. There may be.
That would be part of the change as well.
Yeah, so I just mentioned there's no such a thing right now. as a
Maybe we won't
preliminary
call it
budget.
that, but
that's our, it's in our current draft as it is,
Yeah.
that the town council would adopt a preliminary budget and then a final budget.
Mhm.
And then I believe in the current, again, as it is at this exact moment, preliminary budget, then small petitions, then final budget, and then possibly
Referendum.
referendum petitions after that. And then adoption. And before the end of June.
And something I'd read, and maybe with all you guys here right now, I can get this answered, question answered. I thought there was a provisional budget, something that had to be submitted to the state. I was looking, I think it's the timeline that's on the website. Is that
No.
true?
Once the,
I don't know what I was reading then.
Once the budget is passed, We have to have the final levy and all the assessment calculations submitted to the state to get approved before we can put it to the ballot. Because we've moved up our timetable 2 weeks ahead of where we were last year, 16 days ahead, we're really pinched and it's due tomorrow. And if they have any changes, we won't hit our publication deadline for printing the ballots. So we're kind of running up against a really tight timeframe this year. But yeah, the state reviews the final budget and levy increase because they need to verify that we're not exceeding the 4%. They need to verify that we're meeting our minimum maintenance of effort and all these other things.
So is that a hard date by the state, or is it just X amount of days before the referendum's planned for?
It's X amount of days before the referendum.
Okay.
So last year, the referendum was held on June 10th. And I think in the charter, it's supposed to be like the second
Supposed to be like
Thursday in
next week, I
May.
think.
Like,
or something.
It would be,
Next
yeah,
week or the
a
week
week
after.
from-
3 days
a week
after
from
the
tomorrow.
town financial meeting. I
Which
think.
I thought was
Like
like the second Tuesday
Second
or
Tuesday,
third
something
Tuesday
like
or
that.
something.
functionally, there's no way we could do that, but
So we need to fit it in early on. We'll review the timeline that you used this year. It needs to be slotted early
But
on.
basically, it's the petition period is between when the town manager submits the budget to the town council and the hearings.
yeah, which is how we did it this year. Because I presented on April 4th, then we had hearings on April 25th and 30th, and then on 2nd, the council
We voted.
voted.
And what we're talking about with the town council, voting on a preliminary budget would be more on the idea of you're accepting the town manager's budget and then opening it up for petitions from the electors.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Yep.
Thank you.
But the bottom
I just
line
wanted
is
to
at the
make
end,
sure
we
that-
have a budget.
Yeah, no, it's
I heard
good.
that part too, because you didn't mention the first petition, so.
Yeah, with the ultimate goal being either or, not yes, no. At the-
Yeah, one or the other.
Trying to get away from having 5 referendums in a year to pass a budget.
Well, that's up to the town. Right now, the town council decides whether there will be additional referendum.
Well, we're trying to make it more palatable to the people. Ask them questions that they feel that it's going to be in their best interest, and they'll vote for it on any issue. Anything further on budget? Fire department.
You want to go into the amendment of charter?
I did it that first. Do you want to?
The
Bob's
50-year,
proposal.
All right, let's back up and let's go to the 50-year comprehensive.
okay. So made some changes on this. If you recall last week, I asked people to review it and come up with any suggestions that they would want. Around. As far as whether or not pros and cons, reasons for doing it, some of the requirements that might be in there as far as suggestions for what would be involved on it. But the gist of it is over the,
Is it enough?
I've got it. I've got it in front of me, so.
Yeah.
That's good anyway. So essentially what I'm putting into proposes, shall the town council appoint a special charter review commission with the purpose of revising and updating the town charter to make the language clear and consistent regarding the current town practice as well as alignment with current state laws. So basically, we have a 50-year-old document that was modified within a few years of its first adoption, okay, and it's designed to, it needs to be updated, various things along those lines. But anytime you have a document that spans a period of time that has had changes in it, and actually I went through line by line on it, came up with 68 individual changes, including additions to the charter and repeal of a lot of sections in section 9. So there's been a lot of activity over the past 50 years. Any document that suffers that can suffer some drift, which is what you were warning us about reviewing section 8 for anything referring to the budget. Okay, the second aspect of this is that certain things fall out of practice. Do we still have the same, was it Department?
Records, I think.
Yes, Department of Records, which we don't really have anymore, yet it is in the charter, so we're actually not in compliance with the charter if we don't have a Department of Records that the town manager
I am.
has to be in charge of. Other things would be state law changes that the charter may not have caught up with. So rather than, of a 6-month period to review sections in which, reviewing individual sections, doing deep dives into those, what's being proposed is an extended charter commission, a 50-year review, no less than a year. I have in here as a subject for a discussion with a no later than report date of 2 years with the possibility of extension with the permission of the town council if necessary. And this, what you have is kind of the format that we've been using in discussing these things, which is potentially what the question would be, or the question that we are asking. It may not necessarily the final ballot question. Applicable sections, in this case, the full charter, the rationale for it, and the pros and cons with it. And then in this case, underneath is recommendations as to what should be involved and what should be available for resources.
So the intent is like we may have, let's just say we have 7 suggested ballot questions. One of them would be a special commission to do a very lengthy review, 50th year review of the charter to bring it up to date with more time in a longer time period.
And it would straighten out any inconsistencies between
That
what
would
we
be the
have,
purpose of it.
what state law is. And I think it was Sarah that thought streamlining it as
Yes.
a non-political, straight down the middle of the road type thing. Is that
Yep.
what you wanted, Sarah?
She's muted.
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. Yes, I thought that might be a good idea. I mean, I know we're under time crunch, but I think looking at the document as a whole and almost scrapping it and starting over to align with something more up to date.
And there is a publication that was revised in 2021 from National Civic League for model city charters. And I think that would be a starting off place. Right now, that is a free to download thing, which I did. And then there's a second document that I think would be useful that I handed out last week or and sent out last week. National Civic League. Really got messed up in the thing. But basically, this is direction on what a charter commission should be doing and what they should be looking at. That one is not a free one, so the town would have to purchase that separately, but I bought it, so.
I just think that many charters around our state predate ordinances. So now where towns have a set of ordinances in place that a council can change a little easier than going for a charter change, it would make more sense to make our charter very basic and make all the details in the ordinance. Just a thought.
So we have a code of ordinances and we also have ordinances that the town council enacted since home rule. Is that the same like they have in West Warwick?
Yes, I think most towns have their code of ordinances as well as their charter, but I think that, like I said, I think most code of ordinances weren't drafted until after, or I'm sorry. Yes, I am getting that right. Charters were drafted before the code of ordinances.
Well,
So I think
before
especially like we've brought up before.
home rule, cities and towns were all fell under the preview of the General Assembly. Am I right or wrong?
I would think so. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So
Because
that's
the
called
case.
statutory towns
Yeah.
and cities. right?
So that still is in play in every city and town, whatever the state, passed before home rule was enacted for the cities and towns.
Right. I just would like to see a document that represents our town that definitely gives the checks and balances, but isn't prohibitive of our local officials or appointed officials executing their duties efficiently.
Is it a fair statement to say that you need, and I don't know the ordinance as well as I know this charter because I've been reading this more, but there needs to be synchronicity between the ordinances and the charter. There shouldn't be overlap. Those types of things would be part of this review.
Right. I think we brought up from example before, like for instance, the whole purchasing. Purchasing could be covered by ordinance, and that way it would be flexible and the council could, change it after 2 hearings. I think that that's how Coventry does it, is through 2 hearings. If they needed to change the amount because, inflation or whatever, rather than having to go through a whole charter change to change that amount.
Yeah, Ben had brought up the fact that over the years, he thought that the cap on purchasing or going out to bid was raised to somewhere between 18 and 19,000. It's not written in the state law. I guess it's unwritten.
I think it's a rule promulgated by the Department of Revenue
Okay,
of Municipal
so
Finance.
Yeah, was.
Right. So I think.
giving the
Sorry.
council that authority to do purchasing in excess of $10,000 just allows them to do it up to that certain amount. Yes? Sarah?
Oh, sorry. I just lost you guys for a second there. Can you just repeat that last statement, Scott?
So what you're saying is we could probably strike that part in the charter about purchasing, give that authority to the town by ordinance, and they could easily write it to be not to exceed, what's the title?
Yeah, the state rule.
The state rule, so to speak.
Right.
Because the law itself hasn't changed.
Correct. That's exactly, that's just one example that I was thinking of that stood out to me right away. I'm sure we probably break that part of our charter all the time, right? So it's just more making our charter more basic. Like, this is the purchasing agent or authority for the town. This is, just kind of giving the definitions of the players involved and, not making it quite so detailed in the charter and really allowing the ordinance to take over where those questions come up.
Also, when we organized, Dan, I made sure that I worked off of the 1972 charter. So in 1972, that purchasing number was $1,000. So, and then it was changed to 5,000 in, I think, the 80s. And then it was 10,000 according to state law. But there are a lot of things that are very outdated. And a lot of things that were put in there, as I said earlier, for political purposes. And it's time we have that, or give the opportunity to the voters to see if they want to review the entire thing, streamline it, and make it a simple document, like the Constitution, that can't be touched without a real lot of work. That's the way we're thinking of going. Anything else, Sarah?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, Bob?
That's it that I had for that.
Okay.
This is great. This is great, Bob. Interesting to note that the most changes have been made on Article 8, of course.
Yes.
Financial provisions.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised.
it's
by
the
that.
winner by a
That's an interesting document.
Okay. So if we're all set there, section item D. Article 7, town solicitor discussion and action. We talked 2 weeks ago. And I had asked for something and didn't get, and I finally got it. So we got a breakdown of the legal expenses for the town from 2012 to present. 2012, their budget started out at 414,900. Then it went up a little, then it went down a little bit, then it went down a lot. These are budgets, not actual spending. So I did a little mathematics here. And
I gave this to everyone.
you can hand those out. if you want.
Yeah, everyone.
Yeah, everybody got one? So from 2012 to 2022, 8 annual budgets were overspent and 2 fell under budget. The total budget excess was $634,886. For the 2 years under budget, which were 2012 and 19, they were $88,532 under budget. So the legal expenses, or the legal fees exceeded the budget by $545,686 over a 10-year span. Curiously enough, the years 2013, 14, and 15, the total amount of money spent over budget was $498,002. Oh, excuse me, $498,002. These 3 years were during the Central Coventry bankruptcy. Gorham and Gorham represented both sides in court. I haven't I got some information today to find out what the legal expenses were for the taxpayers of the Central Coventry Fire District through this bankruptcy, and I intend to have them for you next week. So since the bankruptcy, it seems that you know, the overages would go down a lot. They went down, but not down significantly. So like I said, we're spending $50,000 a year or more sometimes. It's getting expensive. And our thought was to change the position of solicitor for the town from a billable hours position to a town employee whose focus is on the business of the town. I'm sure that there's a going rate. Last week, Mike Stevens said he thought that, you know, with the way the things are nowadays, that guy would have plenty of work to do. Ben mentioned that if things slow down, he could actually start working on things like, you know, the stuff that's in the budget that, or in ordinances, cull out some of the stuff that's no longer there, but it'd be well worth the expense rather than paying someone by the hour every time a board, commission, town councils, well, school committee has their own, you know, their own legal counsel, but my thought was, and it was suggested by Ben, that we make that a town employees positions. That would totally be up to the council, but it could be a suggestion by us because it is mentioned. The solicitor position is mentioned in the charter. Any discussion?
I would just like to make, I'm sorry, one quick comment. Gorham Law is not the only legal
I
counsel
understand.
we have. We just came out of negotiations with another lawyer. When we did the WED negotiations with Wind Energy Development, it was another lawyer. There were different lawyers for a number of activities in which we are engaged. So I don't know how much that affects your deliberations, but this number does not represent the money given to just one law company law firm, because some people that we hire have specific expertise, such as in negotiation, union contracts, et cetera.
But
I would just mention that.
aren't there also some of those costs because of conflicts of interest with the current town solicitor? You had to go outside of,
They're on our sheet.
Well,
Give one of these?
No,
that is true, but the argument is we would have paid the.
We would have
cost.
paid the set, we were paying
Right,
someone either
okay,
way, so
all right.
that shouldn't really.
Those fees are addressed under these line items. You have legal counsel. Well, you have the landfill, labor counsel, legal services, professional services. They're not under that same heading.
all I'm doing is mentioning that we do have many legal
Oh, yeah.
Lots of legal expertise, negotiations. We've been in police negotiations twice this year now. When did we finish the last one? A few months ago.
Well, it was just in September. We
Yeah, a
approved
few
that
months ago,
contract,
because we,
so
instead of having a 3-year,
6
we
months
had a
later,
1-year
we're back
rollover.
in.
And then we had SRP, well, not
And then you had to do it
SRP.
again.
Yeah, the municipal employees, and we're using, the same legal counsel. So this does not represent just one firm, just to let you know.
I think
That was
one of the
good.
ideas that Ben had mentioned was basically the charter right now says solicitor reports to you, right?
Yeah.
As of right now.
Yes.
And I think like the bigger thing is like, we can come up with as many ideas of how to overall change it, but really it should be the town council's final decision. And I think that was what we were discussing, is having to change the solicitor reports to the town council.
That would be the substantial change to the charter, because the charter just says town solicitor. It doesn't say whether it has to be hourly or in-house. It just says there needs to be a town solicitor appointed. So that doesn't necessarily change based on the opinion of this body that it should be in-house or hourly.
I
But
don't know if you could go back, how far you could go back to find out when the last time we did have in-house counsel was. I'm thinking in the,
it's gone back and forth.
yeah,
heard.
I'm thinking in the 90s. Maybe even into the 2000s. So, my thought was that it might be in the taxpayers' best interest that the solicitor be a town employee, but it doesn't mean that it will have any effect on what the town budgets, because they still have these other, as you said, legal matters, professional fees and stuff like that. I turn around and I move my piece of paper here.
The advantage on that would be that you would have somebody who's looking after the interest of the town, recommending whether or not it needs to go outside or not as well,
Mhm.
So I think there might be some advantage to be gained there, in addition to doing a lot of the stuff that we have to go through, come out, and then it goes through 2 lawyers before it goes anywhere else, type of thing. So
Just so I understand too, because I'm just reading the article, there's town solicitor, and then there's a legal budget. And the two are not the same.
Right.
That's a subset of the budget for legal, because you need other expertise, as you said. And right now, the town solicitor, I think we talked about, the language is such that it could be an employee. It doesn't say what it has to be. So the flexibility of doing that's already built into that, right? But then the other question was, should it be approved by the town councilor? Right now, the town manager
who does the counselor
appoints the solicitor.
report to? Who governs
Who
them?
negotiates the contract for the solicitor?
well, that would be the town manager. And it's an open-ended contract, so I haven't negotiated or touched it. We just get rates. And they haven't changed their rates in a long time, and since they started maybe, but
What is that going rate that they're paying right now, if you don't mind me asking?
About 150 an hour.
yeah, 150 an hour.
150 an hour.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical.
But the labor,
across the state.
Labor is closer to 190.
A little bit more, I think.
Right, but the labor attorney, that ebbs and flows, right? If it's negotiations for contracts with the police or fire.
Right, the negotiations don't typically happen every year. So yeah,
Right.
it's more as needed, but then you have grievances that come up or arbitration that you can't
Yeah,
predict.
The
So,
contract,
but that's the problem with all legal services, is that as a rule, you don't predict when you're gonna get sued and when you have to defend. But over the years, you can just see that we have a volume of legal services that the town's consuming. And one of my thoughts is that an hourly service is by nature more defensive and handles the issues that arise. An in-house attorney could be more proactive or offensive and heading things off before they get here. But that's also going to be dependent on just scope of effort and time it takes to do the work. Because even if we hired one person in-house, they might not be able to do the work that a firm can do with the additional resources of paralegals and partners.
And the other suggestion you had last week was to change the charter to have the town solicitor hired by the council.
Right.
I would agree with that. I really think it should be up to the council and not there.
My only comment would be too, it was like, what's the due diligence in hiring the legal, whether it's a permanent solicitor, whether it's contracted. Is there an annual process of due diligence? To seek the best deal or the best expert, or
So
is it competitive? I don't know.
you under state law for procurement, it's not competitive based on cost or fees. And it doesn't work that way. So you would do a request for qualifications to hire the most qualified candidate. But in a field of equally qualified candidates, you're going to interview them to see who you work with, who's a good fit. And it's
Yeah.
hard to say, like, are you going to be better off with $100 an hour attorney or a $500 an hour attorney? If the $500 an hour attorney can get you across the finish line in 6 months instead of 2 years,
Yeah,
you're
understood.
better off.
Yeah,
And,
you've got
and
to,
there's no way to predict that or model that. So it really comes down to the relationship and who you have confidence in and how that's going,
it can only be an interview process, basically.
pretty much.
You're hiring somebody, whether it's contract or not,
Right.
is it the right fit, the right expertise, all those things.
In-house,
Got it.
you have salary and benefits that you negotiate and fix. And those are going to be potentially more stable, less costly than a firm's rates. But if the firm's keeping their rates artificially lower and subsidizing that service across other clients, there's a whole bunch of dynamics that you don't really know.
Yeah, the proactive idea I like a lot. The contracted idea, and I've worked with lots of contractors and done competitive bidding of contractors for other things. But you're one of many clients.
But you also
for
have
them.
the services of a full service firm to tackle big problems all at once, where one person on staff might take.
Not
months
to use a
get
round
there.
term, but they may have a guy.
Right.
They could do that.
I'll go to. the
Back
law
to your point too,
library,
that has the
law
expertise
library
in their
for a week.
firm. Yeah, okay, yeah. It seems like the town council is the only, to me, the only change that occur here with our recommendation. I know we collectively talked about a permanent employee as a good idea, at least at this point in time. So it's just a suggestion, I guess, not really a valid question, is it?
Well, it could be.
If we change that,
If we change the charter to
The
say
town
that
council
the town
language.
council hires the legal counsel, it would still give them, I think, the option to go with a
but that would
They
be
could
the-
go-
employee.
that would be the
It
only
would be
change.
their
huh?
choice to go A or B or a combination thereof,
Yeah.
but
If they wanted, if it's at their discretion, go out to RFP every 2 or 3 years.
And it's funny because in Pennsylvania, they actually had an annual reappointment of every officer of the town, including the town solicitor, the town engineer, the town manager. But on the flip side, it was rather a perfunctory formality, because if they weren't planning on changing anything, they would just kind of go through the process and it was just a form over substance. But that each year, the engineer, the solicitor, and everyone had to submit if they were outside services, had to submit their rate sheet every year, and there was a process. So there were some things that I liked about that, but other parts that didn't really make a
That's
difference.
something that should be negotiable, you would think, the rate sheet.
But if you say you want to revisit it every other year or something,
Yeah, that might be worth doing. That's,
but that could be, that could be discussed and negotiated today with our current services. So-
we do it at any time.
So basically.
And right now, we're having a
just
hard
move it,
time
move it.
getting services, at least for engineering. The engineering firms are cutting back their hours and increasing their rates, and we're paying more for less and our needs are
Do
growing.
we have a town engineer?
Um, Part-time, they cut back from 20 hours a week to 8.
Oh, didn't we have a full-time engineer at one time?
Yeah, since 2018, we've had a contract service with an engineering firm since then. No, that's inspection
Oh,
services.
sorry.
Crossman Engineering. But we also have a contract with Weston and Sampson for sewers. And I've been advertising since February for a town engineer. And we've only had like 4 or 5 applicants, and the interesting ones have already taken jobs before we got to them. So tough times. And engineering firms said the same thing. They can't hire anyone either.
Yeah.
They're training new people out of college.
Okay. Before I go to new business, last week I had asked Brad if he would put some questions for a poll together and a press release, so that we can try to get some public input. I don't know if you gave you copies of those yet.
Adam,
I would entertain a motion to go ahead and move forward with this, maybe with a couple of corrections. That I don't think that
Thank you so much.
that we really have to expound upon. They're simple questions to see how the townspeople feel. Press release, maybe to, the local newspaper or something, just so that the people that are out there know what's going on, because everybody thinks that everything's hidden behind a cloak when it comes to government. And, I think it's our duty to try to engage them and try to get out of this. People that dislike government and vote no every time on everything, and engage the people and see what they want. Is there a motion to go ahead with this?
Talking about the questions.
The questions, the press release. There might be a couple of corrective things that have to be done with it, but
It's just, please read the following 3 questions.
yeah, I think that one might be confusing, so we might change
Okay,
that
yeah,
just a little
yeah.
bit, so.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the press release, because I think we're trying to have general topics that we're
Yeah.
discussing. So I would suggest that expansion of town council seats instead of 7, just saying we're
Could do that.
looking to expand it, so there's no numbers here.
Right.
Okay,
It's just general topics that we're looking at that would help, I think.
And you do know the 3 that we had been talking about, right, for local government,
Yes.
so.
I'm looking at the survey questions, number 3. They're not discrete choices here. Because it says expand to 7 seats and keeping the 5 existing districts with 2-year terms. But then you have add 2 at-large seats with 4-year terms. So people have to choose between 2 years and 4 years, but you're not sure when they answer this question, whether they're thinking about the first half of the question or the second half of the question. I've written a lot of questions, so this is why I mentioned it to you.
Maybe it should be 2 different questions.
Well, all right, we'll
I just
amend it.
give it to you because once you get it, you need to have actionable items. So if you get some response and you're not really sure what they've answered the question.
yeah,
I'll-
you,
Which
It's
question
more like it's
they've
not a
answered.
yes,
you
no
did.
question.
Yeah.
It's an
or,
either or.
or if you could just say like the first one, or
well, no, because okay, I know,
if we
I
expand to
understand what
7,
everyone's
trying to
saying.
list, maybe
But
like,
I was just basing it off our discussion where we had thought if we added at-large seats, the terms would be 4 years because it would be a larger area to canvas and more work.
So you could do an A, B, or C, neither.
Yeah,
I would almost say the first question I'd be okay with, like expanding to 7 or no, that should be like its own. And then if it expands to 7, here are the different ways it could be done.
Okay,
7 districts done by population, 5 districts, 2 at large, 7 at large town. I'm just throwing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
it's almost,
Okay.
One only.
but pick
Yeah.
one, yes.
it's almost,
Okay.
if you answered yes,
all right,
you
yeah,
can answer the
and
next
then
thing.
that'll negate the,
Yeah.
okay,
all right, so.
Yeah, even if you answered no to expanding to 7, please answer the next one if
We could almost, we can't really indent them on the survey thing if we could.
We might be able to format it or.
Because we've seen forms like this online for various things, right?
Yeah.
If you're this, then what do you think about this or that type of thing?
Are you in favor of
Yeah.
choose one, then put the three?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's all. I think that would
I
do
can
it.
redo that. That's
Yeah.
easy.
Are you guys
It'll
all
be
right
more- it'll be
with
more logical.
sending this stuff out?
I just,
I want to get some input.
one of
We
the,
did get some input on, what was the?
Terms.
What it terms.
On
Terms
terms.
in
Party affiliation.
party affiliation.
We did get some input on that, and how many votes
they're
were there?
both like
We had
65%
about 100.
favor.
I think we had about 100 votes,
77. I think those are the two pie charts that we had.
Yeah,
and both of them had a pretty sizable.
They're both like 65% in favor of both of those
Yeah. So if we,
partisan elections, and what was the second one?
term,
It was,
2-year term.
yeah.
it's 2
Term length.
terms, and it was,
I think that
was-
the
it was
term length
granted.
was high, it was more closer to
I
70
got it
than
here
the
somewhere.
party affiliation was around 65.
But it was pretty high. I would just suggest on the
Yeah,
press
both-
release, Scott,
wasn't part
do
of
we
the
want to
party
add
affiliation.
special elections? That's something we were talking about too. Yeah, we're just trying to give them a flavor. of what
Oh,
we're
I
doing,
thought,
so-
I can word it differently. That's why I put elected seat vacancies.
Okay, yeah, you got it.
Yeah, that's.
I knew that there were a couple of corrections. that's
Yeah, you
why.
got it. Yeah, you got
Well,
it.
the question on the
Got
party
it.
affiliation was not that it be a partisan election, but that the candidates designate their.
Designate their party label.
Affiliation, or in the case of an independent, their lack of, as
Right.
an I as opposed to a D or an R. Or CM if Mr.
I
Healy.
don't think
had
there is no
No, not
modern party
anymore.
anymore. I think that at that time,
I know, I'm very disappointed there. I am.
he was a character. He was
He
pretty
was.
cool. He was
Very
pretty cool. So motion to do these corrections and send it out, because as the town council president said,
I'll make a motion.
time is
I'll second
of the essence. Motion made and seconded, all in favor.
Hi,
Chair votes aye. So moved.
that's good.
Vote Sarah?
Great.
Sarah?
Good night.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Really good.
I keep forgetting you guys up there.
That's okay. If I disagreed, I'd speak up.
New business, section 309, emergency declarations. This comes to us from Tom Meek, who is on the screen right now. I told him last week that I would put him on the agenda and I would ask a few questions. I was considering sending you the answer to these questions by email, but I didn't want to violate the Open Meetings Act law by sending communication between us outside, which I think is probably the right thing to do.
Yep.
So are you there, Tom?
Yes, hello.
Okay, so we asked two people their thoughts on this. The first being Kevin McGee, who is the brother of Kerry, who did impose that curfew during that riot there in 2020. His answer to the question was this: having been in that situation, there needs to be a point of contact who is authorized to make those decisions in a matter of moments. Leading by committee in an emergency is dangerous to both the residents and emergency responders. That person has historically been the chief elected official, the town council president, to make those decisions regarding a state of emergency. The other person that we asked was Chief Heiss of the police department, and his response was, my opinion of section 309, declaration of state of emergency, is that it should definitely not be changed to a quorum for the declaration of an emergency. If it was changed to a quorum, the impact would have detrimental effects on the safety and lives of the residents, as well as the possibility of further damage caused by the delay in convening a meeting. The very definition of an emergency is it requires immediate action without delay. If anything, I would further expand it. I would further expand this at a minimum to include a successive order down to the town manager in the entire town council's absence. He further added that under section 316, that ordinances in emergency allows for the council to end an emergency declaration if they feel it is not warranted. So, so it's made to be immediate, and it's made to be immediate for a reason. You sent us something that had to do with Foster and Barrington, was it?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so how do you think that we should move with this? Because we have to have that authority. And I would imagine that once a declaration of an emergency is put in place, that all council members are noticed and put on alert, so to speak, to be ready to make any big decisions. Am I right or wrong? And in an emergency, if you had to declare an emergency in the town, a curfew, or whatever the case may be, would you, or are you required to notify the rest of the council members to say, I had to do this for this reason, and we probably should either meet or be aware of what's going on, because eventually it's going to have to end. It can either be a long thing or it can be a short thing. And I think Tom's thoughts on it were that he thought it was just a little bit overreaching for one person, the council president, to declare an emergency. So if today you were forced to declare an emergency for whatever reason, it would have to be, of course, imminent danger. Do you think that you would probably notify the rest of your council members and let them know what's going on, so that, you know, if any other action has to be taken? I would have a emergency operations center here. Or is it this building?
That stood up administratively, because the police chief is the emergency management authority. He makes those calls to stand up the EOC. A lot of that has to do with the incident command system and the national incident management system in cooperation with the fire and police in conjunction. But the declaration of the emergency is something that typically the police chief or the public works director will call me and say, we need a declaration of emergency. I'll call the council president and say, here are the reasons we need a declaration of emergency.
And then I sent an email agreeing.
Right.
And then I would always notify the town council of the action to have been taken.
Okay, so it's not like it's only a single person that's doing
It's
it.
not made in a vacuum.
There is some reasoning behind it. So, Tom, does this answer any of your questions? Do you still
It
feel the
does
same?
clarify, but I would just maybe like to see that in writing in the future, like
Okay,
the process. And then
So-
also if there's a method of reporting back as to, you know, why the declaration was declared.
what we can do is we can write the language that allows that declaration. And I think that the police chief thinks it would be a good idea to expand it in case the town council president is out of town,
Yeah, that's
where it goes down in succession. I don't know if it can also be in conjunction with the code red system that we have that notifies us in case of an emergency. Are you on the code red? Have you ever gotten a call from that before?
I've gotten many code reds,
Okay,
the rabies.
so what we could do, and this might answer your question and maybe satisfy your curiosity. We could add the language that the police chief would like to have, which would make sure that it goes down in succession in case there's no one there, all the way down to the manager or his designee. And at the same time, we can include language that says any measure taken should be, how would you put it? Sent out via whichever emergency message system that the community has.
We would use the code red alert or emergency messaging system to actually notify people of danger, or, you know, when I was at the city of San Diego, there were wildfires and you had smoke danger of inhalation. So there was a shut-in order to stay in your homes, don't go to work, don't go anywhere. So we would want to notify people of what's necessary to keep them safe. But in terms of the council president notifying anyone of the declared state of emergency, There isn't really a necessity from a public communication standpoint to make
I'm
that
looking at,
happen.
I'm looking at the ordinance now.
It's a courtesy.
It's a
316.
courtesy, right? And what I have seen in other communities, though, is that to address Mr. Meek's concern, if a council president were to declare an emergency that, let's say the rest of the council disagreed with, typically I've seen it be 48 to 72 hours that that emergency declaration is in effect. And in order for it to continue, must be ratified by a special meeting of the council to continue it or cancel it.
Okay.
So there are options that you could look at for hedging that if there was a need for it.
And Tom, if you were listening, we're thinking about streamlining the charter to begin with.
Correct.
So adding a lot of language where it really doesn't need to be added. Go ahead.
I would say that from a procedures standpoint, this should be a procedure that's enumerated in the emergency operations plan that the EMA director manages, the police chief. So we should have all these procedures listed. It's a public document that the public's entitled to read. We usually keep that document. It has a thinner version for the public. And then we have a lot of the contracts and details that is not subject to public sharing because it's work documentation and may have sensitive phone numbers and personal information. But it's the procedures that it sounds like you're really interested in. How does this work?
The procedures and also reporting back. We're the biggest town land-wise in the state. And it was just back in that June 2020, it just was like kind of in shock that one person could put a curfew through the whole town.
No, that was before I got here. and
Right.
I could ask the chief if that was a
Mr.
request.
McGee.
Yes, it was Mr. McGee, but as the town council president, but I don't know whether the police chief asked for that curfew.
Mhm.
Or the state
specifically.
police.
Or the state police or the governor.
Or the
right.
governor.
Can I just interject
Yes.
one question and ask Council President? If you go out of town, do you appoint an acting town manager if you're not gonna be available for some
No,
reason?
we have a vice president.
Okay. So maybe the concern about it just being the town manager could be, or the town manager's designate.
Well, I don't.
The town council president designate.
No, it's not a designee, it's a vice
It's the
president.
vice president.
Okay,
So in the absence of both the council president and vice president, it would just fall to one of the other most
Council
senior
persons.
council
Mhm.
by seniority.
Yeah. So
okay.
I guess the questions I have here too, is what needs to be in the charter and what is already in a plan? To your point, chain of command, responsibilities, communication plan. Is any of that, does any of that need to be here? To Tom's point, follow-up communication, what designates an emergency? I mean, just a list of things here, I think we talked the last time too, maybe also sometimes when you declare an emergency, and you can correct me because I don't know, that you're doing that because maybe that immediately triggers something with the state in terms of funding something, like they do, like the state governors do it all the time. It triggers federal assistance, things like that. Should those things, I'm just trying to think what should be here. Certainly a little bit more should be here, I think.
Well, the chief's only suggestion was that in the absence of all 5 council members being able to declare the emergency, it could be assigned to the town manager to make that determination. If I can't get a hold of everyone, and because phone lines are down, internet's down, power's out, and there's no one to email, text, or call and say, hey, declare the emergency. Yeah, it would be nice to have a provision in there, but when things are going that wrong, even if I did declare the emergency and I have no authority to do it, I don't think anyone's going to question it because we're dealing with bigger issues. Emergencies are the time to act and do something about it. And once you get the situation stabilized, then you can kind of roll back and start addressing things differently.
Probably, we were dealing with COVID at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
So my guess would be that the reaction to what happened in Providence probably warranted the state police to get involved. And when the state police got involved, and they probably thought in the best interest of everybody, might want to consider, closing things down for a while. And I will, on my own, double check with Kerry to see, because you piqued my curiosity. I'm glad he did what he did, and hopefully it doesn't have to happen again. But I'm surely going to find out, what prompted him to do it.
And when it was issued, the order originally said effective immediately, it will be every night from, I can't remember, 11 PM to 5 AM or something to that effect. But it was rescinded the next day. It only lasted one night. Originally, it was like, we're not sure what's going on, so we're putting it in. A day later, we've come to, we don't need it anymore. So that's like, it may have sounded like it was going to be perpetual, but once we got the situation under control and we realized what was going on, we can go back.
Mhm.
But the provision is there is like, we got a little bit of info, stuff could be bad. We want to, if we had one night where everyone had to stay home because we weren't sure how bad it was going to be. That's one thing. It's one thing where it becomes a long thing, which is, I think, what
Yeah.
we just weren't sure about.
Yeah, it was the riots in
We had
Providence.
the riots
and-
on Monday and this
and
was
then-
on
and then-
Tuesday.
And then there were vague,
There was chat.
there was
chat.
vague threats against shopping centers and center.
Yeah.
Are you in agreement though, we need a little more in this section, pretty important. I'm glad Tom brought it up. That's a section 309, it's pretty important.
I think, if everybody was hooked into this code red thing in the town, it probably would make it easier for everybody.
I like it a lot.
I'd be wary of putting too much into the charter, because
Yeah.
it seems to me that
Make it, put it into an ordinance.
this is a trigger, okay?
Yeah.
And it should be an ordinance, it should be in your emergency management plan, it should be in a variety of other things. But, the thing with an emergency is you don't know what the next one's gonna be. I was working with healthcare software. One of the things that you could guarantee is that whatever caused your system to go down this time was not gonna be the same thing that caused your system to go down the next time, because you worked this one.
Right.
Okay, and you fix the problem for that one. You don't know what the next one's gonna be, so you try to be proactive. But what's gonna take you down is always gonna be the one that you didn't think of. So I wouldn't wanna see too much
Not in the
added
charter,
to
but in
the
the code of
charter.
ordinances.
Court of Ordinances would be a more appropriate
Yeah.
place for it.
I think that's what the police chief suggested in the second part of his answer. So Tom, did that satisfy your curiosity? Did we do enough research for you? And if not, and I'll do it anyways. I'm gonna talk to Kerry and I'm gonna ask him, what prompted him to do it. So you were prompted to reach out to us because you thought that there was a little overreach. And,
Little overreach. And
go
there should
ahead.
be some bounds, like Mr. Marchant said, 2 to 3 days afterwards. Maybe that's in the emergency operations manual, that it should go back to the town council as a check.
Well,
That's what my thinking was.
okay, so it probably is something that doesn't need to go in the charter. It probably needs to be either an ordinance or the emergency operations of the town. And an ordinance can address this instead of the charter itself, so that we can keep the charter kind of like streamlined. Does that work for you?
Yes,
Great, thank you. And thank you for your concern. And I will get an answer to that question for you.
thank you.
You're welcome. Public comment. Any comment from the public? If not, we've always considered ourselves the public. Does anybody have anything else that they're concerned with? No. And if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just one thing that I was gonna, I know.
You always catch me right when
I
I.
know. Just something that I'd like to bring it up for next time. We've talked about terms and term limits. We've gotten public information. I think it's time that we need to do some type of action on this as to whether or not to proceed or not proceed with it. And if we could maybe make that decision at our next meeting.
The full 50-year?
No, this is the terms and
For
term
term
limits for
limits.
the,
Oh, okay.
and, yeah, term limits and what was it, party designation. You know, we need to, we've been kicking that one around.
Right, we're
for a
gonna,
while.
well, we're gonna
And I
send
also
that
have,
update to the
and I also have
council.
filling
and-
vacancies.
So our plan is to send every council member, like a, update of where we think we'd like to go in and ask for any of your input. So that we can work together, and not battle each other to try to get questions out. That's what we wanted to do with every item. And, just make sure that we can get what needs to go to the voters,
Not, correct me if I'm wrong, not a final and full presentation, just kind of a couple.
Yeah, it's kind of like an
paragraphs of,
update because
this is our intent.
right, because Ian, as you had said earlier, you may not know exactly what it is that we're trying to do with this language. And we're welcoming your input to say, what can you add to this to make it better? So, that's.
Yeah, just as we were discussing things today,
Right. So,
which is perfect.
Sarah, will you be here next week?
Yeah.
Yes, I will.
Okay, Scott, will you be here next week?
Yes, I will.
Okay, everybody in this room going to be able to be here next week? So we'll have 9 votes next week. I'm pretty sure Steve is going to be here. Excuse me, Mike is going to be here. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion for Bob to adjourn.
I move that Bob and the rest of us adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Well, I hope you like our format. We kind of like.
I'm used to it. I've been watching it.
Well, I like Sarah and Scott. I do. I will. I thought they got married. I thought he was married.
That's good.
I will. Very good. That's funny.